Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Will you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this case is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, Dr. Terry. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Would you introduce yourself to the jury, please? Tell us your name.
I'm Dr. Carol Terry,
Could you spell it for us, please?
certainly. First name Carol, C-A-R-O-L. Last name Terry, T-E-R-R-Y.
And Dr. Terry, what is it that you do for a profession?
I am a forensic pathologist, and I function as the Chief Medical Examiner for Gwinnett County.
How long have you been Chief Medical Examiner for Gwinnett County?
I have functioned in that capacity since February of 2006.
Prior to working as the medical examiner in Gwinnett County, did you have any other experience in forensic pathology?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell us what that was?
Well, prior to coming to Gwinnett, I worked for Dr. Gerald T. Gwitt, and that's G-O-W-I-T-T, who is the Chief Medical Examiner in DeKalb County, and we conducted medical examiner cases for DeKalb County, but also for Hall, Henry, Rockdale, and White counties. Prior to that, I worked for 10 years as a medical examiner in Fulton County, and while I was working in Fulton County for a period of time, we also covered medical examiner cases at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, so the GBI, covering medical examiner cases throughout the state. Also, when I was at Fulton County, and Dr. Gwitt was in DeKalb County, I did some weekend coverage for him and covered cases in Gwinnett, DeKalb, and Cobb counties for him on a weekend basis.
In total, how many years of practice as a forensic pathologist do you have?
30.
And what kind of training have you gone, training and education, I'll lump them together, have you gone through to be a forensic pathologist?
Okay. In 1986, I graduated from Emory College of Emory University, where I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology and a Bachelor of Arts in Religion. From 1986 to 1990, I attended Emory University School of Medicine, where I received my Doctor of Medicine degree. So I am an MD, a medical doctor. From 1990 to 1995, I was a resident in pathology. Pathology, broadly stated, is the study of disease. And I was a resident in pathology in the Emory University affiliated hospital systems. And my 5-year residency in pathology involved the areas of anatomic and clinical pathology. Anatomic pathology is tissue-based pathology and involves diagnosing disease states from tissues, such as biopsies or organs or tissues removed from living people, as well as autopsy specimens. Clinical pathology is the laboratory medicine aspect of pathology and involves diagnosing disease states from fluids, such as blood, urine, saliva, etc., and encompasses such areas as chemistry, microbiology, hematology, and blood banking. In my 5-year residency, I was allowed to work exclusively at the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office in the area of forensic pathology. And forensic pathology is the medical legal investigation of death. And as a forensic pathologist in Georgia, we are guided by the law and a specific part of the law that's referred to as the Georgia Death Investigation Act, which defines our duties as medical examiners. And as a medical examiner, we are interested in deaths that are sudden, unexpected, unexplained, or deaths that are due to non-natural causes, or deaths in which there is no prior physician-patient relationship, so that there's no one who knows more about the patient than potentially I do, who can then sign the death certificate. So after completing my 5-year residency in pathology at Emory, I stayed on staff at the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office as an associate medical examiner. And as I indicated, I worked at the Fulton County office for 10 years, then went to DeKalb for 2, and then I have been in Gwinnett since February of 2006 in a full-time capacity. I am licensed to practice medicine in the state of Georgia and have been since 1992. I'm triple board certified by the American Board of Pathology in all 3 areas of pathology in which I have studied and trained: anatomic, clinical, and forensic pathology. I have personally conducted between 6,300 and 6,400 autopsies. I've supervised individuals in training in over 700 additional cases. When I was at Fulton County, was a co-director of the fellowship training program, and also when I was at Fulton County, I was post-certified by the Police Officer Standards and Training Council to teach in the area of death investigation. And I have testified in the Superior Courts of Georgia and been declared or tendered as an expert witness over 400 times.
I think you answered all the questions I was going to ask. You need some water?
If you wouldn't mind, let me. Thank you.
You got that taken care of at once.
Okay.
Could you just get her a bottle?
That's okay. I think I got it. I got it. Alrighty.
And Dr. Terry, well, before I go any further, Judge, I'm going to move to qualifier as an expert in forensic pathology.
I need to think about it. I have no objections.
Dr. Terry is so qualified as an expert.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Terry, we're going to get to the specifics of this case here in just a second. But have you mentioned, I think you said maybe over 6,000 autopsies that you performed?
That's correct. I've personally conducted over 6,300 autopsies.
Okay. Now, in all of those, are any of those autopsies that you conducted autopsies involving remains that are found, more like skeletal remains of folks who are not, who died from a sudden gunshot wound or something like that?
Yes, I mean, we take the bodies as we get them, and sometimes we get bodies that are in decomposed states, and sometimes we get bodies that are fully skeletonized.
And do you have any idea, just on a ballpark estimate, of how many times you've had to perform an autopsy on a skeletonized body that you've got?
Oh, I mean, I'd say we get maybe about 5 to 10 a year or so.
Okay, so over 30 years?
Yeah, I mean, we get a handful of them, and sometimes, incomplete skeletal remains. So.
All right. I want to take you, well, let me ask you, are there any challenges that present itself when you're conducting an autopsy in terms of a skeletonized individual versus, I would say normal. I don't know what the right scientific term is, but a person who's not skeletonized, who's recently deceased.
Yes, recently deceased. Yes, there are many more challenges when you're dealing with just skeletonized remains because you only have a fraction of the body.
Now, with that, what kind of challenges, on average, do you face?
That's kind of a broad question. I'm sorry. Can you tell me about what exactly you're asking me?
Yeah, I can narrow it down. So, how do you generally go about, when you look at a skeletonized remains, how do you generally go about determining, a cause of death in general?
Okay. Well, first of all, and I wasn't sure what we were talking about here, if you were talking about deaths in general or if you're limiting it to skeletal remains. But initially, when we're dealing with skeletal remains, first of all, I do an inventory of the body. What do I have? What am I missing? What is associated with the remains? Do I just have bones? Do I have personal effects? One of the things that's going to be most important when we're trying to evaluate skeletal remains is, who is this person? Because as we've indicated, I have a fraction of the body. So to determine a cause of death is going to be more challenging, and it's really going to be helpful to know who this person is, because then you can evaluate the circumstances more. And as a medical examiner, I don't just conduct autopsies in a vacuum. Circumstances, or what's at the scene, is very important. And certainly with skeletal remains, that's the case as well, because you've got a whole different situation if the deceased is an elderly person who's known to be demented and will wander away from home, versus someone who is not known to have any kind of mental illness or mental challenges and who winds up in a place that's radically different from an environment that they typically inhabit and has, no other medical conditions that anybody's aware of.
All right. Now, to get to specifics, did you respond to a human remains scene off of Highway 316 in Decula, Georgia, back on February 6th of 2023.
Yes, I did.
At that time, were you acting as the chief medical examiner for Gwinnett County?
Yes, I was.
And describe for the jury, when you got there, what you found.
Okay. Well, when we got there, I was with three other employees, and we walked into this wooded area off of 316, and it was, I'd say, well back into the woods, several hundred feet into the woods. The main body or mass of the remains, the majority of the skeletal remains were in one spot, but there were some bones that were scattered, and in my estimation, up to about 100 feet away from the main mass of the remains. And the bones that were scattered away from the main body tended to be the leg bones and bone of the hip. But where the skull, the ribs, and the bones of the spine were located in that area were also bones from the arms. And in that area, some pine straw, dirt, and other kind of small tree trunks and stuff had kind of amassed on top of these remains. So it involved digging into the top layer of the ground cover a little bit. There were leaves there as well. And at this point in time, it was dark. I know from referring to the record that I pronounced the deceased dead at 8 p.m. that night. So it was dark. People were there with flashlights, and we're trying to recover as much of the body as we can at that point in time.
Obviously, I think you and the investigators that were on scene ultimately made a call to secure it, come back, and continue a search the next day?
That is correct. And the next day, there were other employees from my office who went back to search. I did not return the second day, but I did have other employees who did.
On the first night when you were there, did you take efforts at that time to try and get some kind of idea about maybe the age or gender of the person whose remains were recovered?
Yes.
And how did you attempt to do that?
Okay. Well, one of the best ways to ascertain gender or sex of skeletal remains is to look at the bones of the pelvis. And so in looking at the bones of the pelvis, the pubic angle where the bones come together in the front was very broad. That's indicative of a female sex. Males, the angle tends to be very narrow. It tends to have sort of a V shape, but with females it tends to be very broad. So in looking at the pelvis, I knew we were dealing with a female. Also in looking at the skull, something that you can look at is like the brow, and to see how developed it is. And in this case, the brow was not very prominent. Also the mastoid processes, the bones kind of back behind the ears, again, not very pronounced. With men, they tend to be more robust. So I was confident I was dealing with a female individual. And one of the things too, in looking at the bones, was I was able to see that some of the growth plates were not fused. And so where as people get older and grow, and the bones elongate, that will happen as long as the growth plate isn't fused. And in this case, I could see in some of the bones where that had not occurred. So I knew we were dealing with someone young. Also at the same time, and by young I mean probably teenaged, and one of the things that I had remembered from a skeletal remains analysis type class I had attended years ago was that the last bone to completely fuse is the collarbone or the clavicle. And in seeing the clavicle there, I realized that was not fused. So I knew I was dealing with a young female. And in seeing the skull, there were features that looked to be blended between kind of black and white ethnicities, and that's something that's commonly seen in a Hispanic individual. But while I'm looking at these things and making these observations, I also had one of my co-workers contacting our forensic anthropology consultant who's in Arizona, and they were texting back and forth. I don't think they were actually talking and texting. And some of the things I was saying, she was texting right back, and so confirming what I was seeing, that we were dealing with a young female who was probably Hispanic.
Your Honor, now, first witness. Dr. Terry, I'm going to show you. I've got some photographs here. I've marked them as State's Exhibit 26.1 through 26.13. Would you mind taking a look at these and letting me know if you recognize them?
Okay. Yes, I do recognize them.
And what are they pictures of?
These are photographs that were taken in conjunction with my examination of the remains of the individual, excuse me, identified as Susana Morales.
Are those fair and accurate depictions of what you just described?
Yes, they are. Some of the photographs are taken in the morgue, and others are taken from the scene the night that I was there during the recovery of the remains.
And Your Honor, at this time I'd move to admit State's Exhibits 26.1 through 26.13.
Okay. State's Exhibit 26.1 through 26.13 are admitted without objection. Eddie, would you mind giving Dr. Terry a bottle of water out of my office?
Oh, well, thank you.
When, before you, I guess once you started the autopsy and started looking at the remains later on how did you determine that you were going to try and make a positive identification of the individual?
Okay, well, one of the things that I'm looking at to try to identify this individual is I'm looking to see if there are any distinctive skeletal abnormalities, anything that looks like a prior broken bone, anything that looks like surgical or orthopedic hardware. Also, I have x-rays that are taken to see if there's anything associated with the bones. But the most striking thing and most evident thing in this case is looking at the dental features of this individual, and she had some dental work, and that wound up being the most identifying features about her.
All right. And Judge, I'm going to move to admit State's Exhibit number 8, which are the dental records for Susana Morales from Happy Smiles Dentistry. They are being submitted pursuant to a business record certification from Happy Smiles that is contained in State's Exhibit 8.1, and also State's Exhibit 9, which are dental records from Vital Smiles, which are also being submitted via business record certification labeled as State's Exhibit 9.1.
Okay, State's Exhibit 8, 8.1, 9, and 9.1 are admitted without objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Dr. Terry, I'll leave these up here for you if you need it, right here. Generally, if you're making dental comparisons, you mentioned in this case there's dental work that was done. Mm-hmm. So describe to the jury, I guess, how that's helpful.
Okay. Thank you so much. Well, Susana Morales had 3 teeth that had fillings in them. And these types of fillings are referred to as amalgam fillings. So when you think about the silver-looking fillings, I mean, these days a lot of people have kind of the cream-colored composite restorations that look like tooth material that are harder to see, but those of us who are a little bit older have those amalgam fillings. That's what she had. And as I said, they involved 3 teeth, and 2 of these teeth had 2 separate areas that had 2 fillings in them each. So, I mean, these were very distinctive features. Also, in looking at her teeth, or the teeth of the deceased individual I had, one of her teeth was turned or tilted a bit and overlapped her left upper front tooth. And so it was the tooth next to the left upper front. It's the upper lateral left incisor, tooth number 10, but anyway, it's next to the left upper front, and it was turned and partially overlapped the big front central incisor there on the left.
Your Honor, may I have permission to publish the photographs contained in State's Exhibits 26.1 through 26.13?
Yes.
And if we can go ahead and start with, we'll start with 26.1. Dr. Terry, can you see this image?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And describe for us kind of where this is and what we're looking at.
Okay. This photograph is taken in the morgue, and as I'm going through the different bones, I'm wiping them off, washing them up, cleaning them off, and looking at them. I'm looking at them for anything that's distinctive as well as any evidence of trauma to them, because sometimes the trauma can be somewhat subtle, like knife marks or tool marks that may be on a rib where you have an edge that's just sliced a little bit. So I'm looking at these different bones as I am going through and roughly placing them in an anatomic position. 2, as I'm doing this, I'm looking to make sure that, or taking an inventory to try to make sure that I have as much of the skeleton as possible, and making sure I don't have any duplicates of bones that might indicate I've got more than one individual here. But none of that happened. And as I said, and I don't know if you can see it here in this picture, is there?
We can zoom in for you.
Okay. All right. The bone, it's going to be the left humerus, if we can, is toward the right.
Dr. Terry, here's a pointer.
Yes, that'd be outstanding. All right. As I mentioned about, may I stand?
Oh, certainly.
Thank you.
Just watch your step.
No, zoom out, please. Right there. That's the growth plate I was talking about. Whoops. In one of the bones there, I could see that growth plate had not fused. So again, we're dealing with someone who's probably teenage, and when you see that sort of thing that has occurred, or not, where it has not fused, that indicates you're dealing with a younger individual.
Can we go to 26.2, please? All right, and what are we looking at here?
Okay, this is just another view also taken in the morgue of the bones laid out as I'm going through them. A lot of the bones of the hands and feet just kind of lumped together in the little trays there at the bottom. Again, putting things out roughly in anatomic position. And at this point in time, the only bones that I'm aware that I don't have are the kneecaps and probably some of the bones of the hands and the feet. There's structures in the neck that we're looking for, specifically cartilages and the hyoid bone that were not located. But other than that, we've essentially got the complete skeleton.
We go to the next photograph. All right. And this photograph?
Okay, in this photograph, it shows the skull with the jaw placed next to the upper teeth. As you look at the skull, those are normal sutures or areas where the bones come together in the skull. That is not trauma. Those are not fractures or breaks in the skull, but this is just kind of showing an overall appearance of the skull. It's somewhat oval to rounded, and just again showing no obvious trauma.
All right. And the next photograph?
Okay, this photograph also showing the skull. Unfortunately, the jaw is kind of slid forward. It really should have been positioned back a little bit. But, looking at these facial features here, the nasal bridge is somewhat narrowed. There's kind of a prominent nasal spine. As I said, there's some features here that look somewhat blended between African American and Caucasian. And also, what was it? Oh, I mentioned before about the brow not being very prominent. Again, consistent with a female sex.
And the next photograph? This is 26.5. All right, what are we looking at here?
Okay. In this photograph, we're looking at the skull turned upside down. So we're looking at the upper teeth. And as we're looking at these teeth, let's see, as we look at them, the way you number teeth for purposes of identifying them is your wisdom tooth, your third molar on the right upper side is number 1. She doesn't have that tooth, but it would be here. Then you count 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's that tooth that's tilted, as I described earlier. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and she doesn't have 16. She doesn't have a third molar on either side of her upper jaw. And you see the 2 fillings there in tooth number 14. So I have all of the teeth of her upper jaw, or her maxilla, and the only one that has restorations in it is tooth number 14.
All right. And can we go to the next photograph?
Okay.
And are we looking at a closer up photograph of the top part that you were just showing on tooth 14?
Yes, we are.
Can we go to the next photograph?
Okay.
And what about this one?
Okay, we're looking at the other side. So before we were looking at the left side of the upper jaw. This is the right side of the upper jaw, and we're not seeing any restorations there.
And by restorations, I know what you mean, but you mean
Fillings, yes.
Next photograph.
Okay.
Let's zoom in here.
All right. Now we're looking at the lower jaw, or the mandible. And when we count these teeth, so we ended with 16 up here on the left upper side, then we drop down to the left lower side and start with 17, which would be the third molar or wisdom tooth on the left side. She does not have that tooth, which would be there. So then 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, and 32 would be there. So she doesn't have teeth, she doesn't have third molars or wisdom teeth on the upper jaw or the lower jaw. She's got fillings here in teeth numbers 19 and 30. Tooth number 30 actually has 2 fillings in it. And then as we look at this, we see 2 empty spaces there next to, next to number 19. So teeth numbers 20 and 21, those teeth were lost after she died. And so that's called postmortem absence. And we can tell because there's no healing of those sockets. Those teeth have just fallen out. And that's not unusual because as we were recovering these remains, there were some teeth that were loose there next to the jaws that I had to replace. And we just did not find those 2 teeth.
And did you document all of the fillings and on the remains that you found on a chart that you used from the medical examiner's office?
Yes, I did.
All right. I'm going to show you what I've marked as State's Exhibit number 58. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And is that the chart where you documented all of these the fillings?
Yes, I documented the fillings, the turned tooth number 10, and the fact that I don't have wisdom teeth on the upper or lower jaws, and that I have postmortem loss or absence of teeth numbers 20 and 21.
Is that a fair and accurate representation of that sketch?
Yes, it is.
All right, Judge, I'll move to the next State's Exhibit 58.
Which one?
Sorry, I didn't take note of this.
It's okay. Oh, Mr. Dawson, no objection, okay.
And we publish that?
Yes, 58 is admitted without objection, and you may publish.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Maybe we can zoom in just a little bit, because it's a little hard to.
You're asking the wrong question. Well, it's not letting us zoom, so we're going to do the best we can with this one. Can you just kind of show us, walk us through this sketch that you did here?
Okay. Now, bear in mind, this is a diagram I did of the skull before I knew who the deceased was. The label that's up on the top has been added after she was positively identified. So in taking these remains, I've looked at the teeth, and I have made this dental chart to show what I have. And as I indicated, I don't have the third molars, upper or lower, those wisdom teeth. So I have X'd those out and written that they were absent ante-mortem, which means prior to death. She just didn't have those teeth. Whether she, had them removed or they never came in, I don't know. I just know that they're not there. The ones that are labeled 20 and 21, those are the ones that I told you were lost post-mortem. They fell out at some point, and we just didn't recover them. So if there are any distinctive features about those teeth, I don't know, because I never got to see them. We didn't find them. What I do know, tooth number 10 that's indicated up there, I drew a little arrow to indicate it's turned somewhat. And then the fillings that are on teeth numbers 30, 19, and 14, I've indicated them on this charting, as well as which surfaces of the teeth they involved. And so you'll see where I've got O is for occlusal. It means it's on the chewing surface of the tooth. You'll see B is for buccal or buccal, which means the side towards the gum. L is for lingual, which means toward the side that faces the tongue. And so I've depicted these on this chart so that I can have this for reference to compare to any dental records that I'm presented with.
Did you in fact compare your findings to dental records?
Yes, I did.
And those dental records, are those the dental records that I've provided to you up there in State's Exhibit 8?
Yes, they are.
Now, with State's Exhibit 8, can you publish this?
Certainly. Certainly.
Let's put that up. All right, Dr. Terry, I'm putting up here some records. I think we can zoom on this one. But what did you use? Did you use these records right here in order to make a comparison from Susana Morales?
Yes, I did, because these were the most helpful to me. I did have access to some x-rays, and the x-rays showed were from an earlier time in which she still had baby teeth in her mouth. The remains that I had no baby teeth. They were all adult or permanent teeth. So the thing that was most important to me, can we
Scroll down.
scroll down just, whoa, okay. Okay, yeah, this is good right there. I mentioned before that we were dealing with amalgam restorations, so those types of fillings. And when we look here where it's got amalgam, we've got it written in a couple of places, and we do have like some extractions, which means basically she had teeth pulled, but those were primary teeth or baby teeth that were pulled. Okay, but let's focus on these amalgam restorations and where they have numbers written. Where they have letters written, that has to do with baby teeth. And again, we don't have any baby teeth, so let's not pay attention to the lettering that's associated with those, because that's not relevant. But when we look at the amalgam restorations that involve the permanent teeth, here where it says amalgam, two surfaces primary or permanent, that's tooth number 30. Well, if you look at State's Exhibit 58, tooth number 30 has 2 restorations on it. It's got the occlusal, and then it's got this small filling that's on the gum side, not gum side, the cheek side of the tooth. So it's got 2 restorations. Let's go back to State's Exhibit was 8. Okay, so that's tooth number 30. Then we look at here where it says amalgam, 2 surfaces, primary or permanent, on tooth number 14. Go back to State's Exhibit 58. Tooth number 14, over there, we have the 2 restorations that are on that tooth. Okay, and back to, and then here, amalgam, 1 surface, primary or permanent tooth, tooth number 19. And tooth number 19, over there, we have that 1 restoration that's on the occlusal surface. These are the dental records of Susana Morales. And these are the remains of Susana Morales based upon these dental records. And then additionally, at some point I was shown a photograph of her smiling, and you could see tooth number 10 with that tilt to it. So again, there are all these features of identity without any exclusionary features. There was nothing that I could look at and say, yeah, this absolutely means it's not her. Everything is consistent with this being Susana Morales.
At the point that you had identified her remains, tell us how you went about at that point in the examination and the autopsy and determining the cause of death.
Okay, well, I examined the remains. Let's see, the remains were found on the 6th. I was doing the examination on the 7th. I had employees who responded back to the scene to canvass the scene during the daylight hours to see if we could find any more physical remains there at the scene. I was doing the examination on the 7th and did not see any skeletal trauma to the remains that I have, and was able to make the positive identification upon being given the dental records on the 8th. So in looking at everything that I had, I could not arrive at a specific cause of death. Again, I'm limited in what I have. I just have bones here. But as I mentioned earlier, as a medical examiner, we don't conduct examinations in a vacuum. And you've got to consider the circumstances. And then once knowing who this deceased was, young female, no known significant medical conditions, last known to be alive some distance from where these remains were found. Also, in the course of doing the examination at the scene, I didn't find any personal effects. I didn't find any remnants of clothing. So it looks like she's likely nude at the scene. And so many years ago, early in my training, I was told when filling out death certificates, one of the things that's important is to be consistent. And throughout my career, if I don't have demonstrable physical trauma to the remains, I will tend to use the term undetermined, and then will specifically say why. In this case, I called the cause of death undetermined due to decomposition with skeletonization. I believe if I had had the intact body, I could have come up with a specific cause of death, but I'm limited based on what I have. The body is too decomposed. All I have is a skeleton. Because the circumstances, again, young female, this isolated area where it's far removed from where she was last known to be alive, and no personal effects, no clothing. As a medical examiner with 30 years of experience, if I were to see an intact individual at this type of a scene, first thing I'm going to think of is some type of homicidal violence, specifically some type of asphyxial type component, strangulation, suffocation, chest compression, things of that nature. Because if you have a nude individual, nude or partially nude, that better be, as a medical examiner, that better be one of the first things you're thinking about. And so the fact that she doesn't have any skeletal trauma does not exclude that. And again, my cause of death, undetermined due to decomposition with skeletonization. It's not. If I could test this or that, I could come up with a cause of death. There's no getting around the fact that I don't have what I need to have to make to rule out what I think is going on. I'm very suspicious of strangulation, chest compression, suffocation, smothering, something of that nature. And I just do not have the body in a condition where I can prove that or disprove that. And so I've called it undetermined. And as you can tell from listening to me, I'm very verbose about stuff. On the death certificate, I'm limited to what I can put. But in my report, I'm quite explicit about these are my findings, these are my impressions from the get-go. There's no more testing I can do because what I need to see is not there. And there's no bringing that back. I mean, her neck structures, they're not there. Skin, flesh, it's not there. And it's not that not only can I not tell, no other pathologist is going to have access to this because it's not there. She has decomposed to the point where I can't establish this. I can say I'm very suspicious, and that's where I have to leave it because it's based on the circumstances. And so that's how I came up with my cause and manner of death. By convention, unless I have, again, being consistent, unless I have physical trauma, I tend to call things undetermined and say why. But then we'll go into detail in my report about what my opinion might be. And again, based on my experience, 30 years as a medical examiner with this type of situation, again, young female, deceased, no obvious trauma, and decomposed well away from where she was last known to be alive. This is different from someone who may have dementia, live in the area, and then shows up dead in the woods somewhere. You know, it's very much dependent upon the circumstances, and these circumstances are very suspicious for homicidal violence, but I can't prove it because of the condition of the remains.
Dr. Terry, based on the recovery of the remains in this case, were you able to make any conclusions about how long the remains had been at the scene where they were at? Yeah, that's it.
They'd been there a while, I would say, and by a while, months, maybe, I think she was last known to be alive in January, and July of 2022, and then the remains were found in February of 2023. So it's consistent with that time period. And I say that because almost all of the flesh is gone. There are a couple of bones that have a slight amount of dried soft tissue, but it's very minimal. And there is some fatty degenerating material referred to as adipocere that's associated with rare bones. But she is almost completely skeletonized at that point. And so she's been there for a period of months.